everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Show, episode 9. So happy to be here today with Amanda Singer. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me today.
Amanda is an attorney with a really fascinating business. It's different than what you've heard about from other companies, so I'm going to ask her to do me a favor, do us a favor, and share a little bit about what her company does, and then we'll get started with today's topic.
Yeah, certainly. So we're San Diego Family Mediation Center, and I'm a family law mediator, also a licensed attorney, and a certified divorce financial analyst. I have one business partner, her name's Jennifer Segura, and both of us mediate 100% of the time. So we focus on working with couples who are going through a conflict such as divorce and want to stay out of court. So we don't litigate, we don't go to court at all, but we take care of all of that. So there's still, things on the legal side that need to be done, and we make sure that all that's done correctly. And we also, we're working with them to really help them figure out all of their issues that are coming up in the divorce process.
Wow. Okay, so interesting. I'm so glad to have you on the show, and I know this is going to be a popular topic today. I can see people join Lucian,
and it was really the first time that I heard about it as an option. And so after undergrad, I looked into options for what I wanted to do and was interested in mediation. And so when I applied to go back to law school after working for a couple of years, I only applied to programs that had some kind of mediation or dispute resolution to it. So I have my master's in dispute resolution, which I did at Pepperdine. And I knew that I wanted to work with kids and families because I'd always done a lot of that work. And so the idea, I think, with family law is that mediation works really well because people are maintaining a relationship. And so, I talked about the divorce side of things, and I know we're going to talk more about what else I do, but that there's just so many areas within family law where mediation can be helpful.
Awesome. And for the viewers out here who don't know, Amanda's a really popular speaker, both on radio and television, so it's a delight to have you on the show today. Thank you so much. And everyone is invited to ask their questions as well in the comment section, and we'll get those answered live. So let's get started with today's topic, which is premarital financial planning. And what does that mean, and how do people do it? So first off, can we just define the topic?
Yeah, I think the idea of premarital financial planning kind of encompasses a lot. So for me as a mediator, it's really about communication. It's, when people are getting married, are they having these important conversations about money, about, how they're going to handle things financially, income, property, all of that when they get married. And so it includes kind of the idea of, financial planning, as well as if you're interested in some kind of premarital agreement or prenuptial agreement, as people more commonly, I think, refer to it as. And then also just kind of giving them the resources for when they get married to get more in depth with their financial planning or things like that.
Got it. Okay, so interesting. Thank you, Sonia, for the comment. Definitely an important topic. Thank you so much, Carly, for joining us. So can you give us an example, Amanda, of what does it look like to go through the process of planning this?
Yeah, so when we do premarital mediation with the, premarital financial planning, the idea is we're going to sit down with, both future spouses and to discuss how they want to handle things while they're married. And so usually some of the kind of key topics we're going to talk about are going to be income, what that might look like for them. Is one person looking to go back to school? Are there going to be costs associated with that while they're married? Are both spouses going to work? So if they have, children, is somebody going to stay home with the kids? Having these discussions now and kind of looking at what that might look like on the income and expense side, really looking at budgets, figuring out, are all expenses going to be joint? Is there going to be anything that wouldn't be joint? If you want to buy something that is going to be a gift for your partner, are you always going to want that to be out of a joint account? Or are there going to be things that are separate?
Sure.
And then really getting into also talking about property. So something that I know you know a lot about when we're talking about real estate especially is maybe their first home, maybe investment properties. Like, how do they want to own these, and what are they going to, what are they going to do with them? And if they already own real estate, how are they going to handle that going forward?
Definitely, absolutely. Yeah, it's a really cool tool I'm excited about that I now have to offer, which is a rent versus buy tool for my clients. And sometimes people say, well, the rent is so much less than a monthly mortgage, how can it make sense to buy? But once we look at, the opportunity for appreciation, what it does to your taxes when you own a home, and all the financial benefits that aren't just the numbers of rent versus the mortgage every month, there's really interesting numbers. So I mentioned that to people that I can do those rent versus buy tools. And that's probably something that comes in useful to you also when people are deciding rent versus buy. It's a big financial decision for people.
Yeah, certainly. I think that, people aren't always certain whether they can afford to buy something, and I think really understanding what the difference in cost is for them. And also, you know, if they are gonna buy something, you know, what's that gonna look like? I mean, a lot of times when people come into a marriage, they're not coming in with the exact equal amount of property. So it may be that somebody is putting down 100% of the down payment on a home, and, you know, the other person isn't. So what would that look like down the road? You know, if, you know, we're never planning for anyone to get divorced, because we're hoping it never happens, but if it does, it's, you know, looking at how might you want to handle that. I mean, what does happen if one person puts more into the property and than the other? And I think a lot of times too, you know, there's families involved with that. You know, whether money might come as a gift from family, as an inheritance, or just certain things that, you know, they're trying to figure out how they're going to do that. And so I think if they can really understand, first off, can we buy? You know, can we afford to buy versus rent, and then figuring out, you know, from there, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I know I definitely have clients who come in with a down payment, maybe it's a wedding gift from parents or from both parents, or down payments coming as stock from the company that they were, you know, working at, or stock. Down payments coming from a business they sold. So there's a lot of different pieces that come into that. Are you finding, and any specific, or can you tell us some stories of experiences you've had with clients, either why they come in, unusual situations, or obviously confidential, but just kind of to give a range of all the different experiences? Because I know you hear, you know, the common money fights, sex fights, and kids are like the 3 reasons, and those are big topics, and I'm sure there's more detail to it.
Yeah, well, and I think that, you know, a lot of times people do maybe premarital counseling, right? And they might talk about the kids, and they might talk about the sex, but they're not always talking about the money. And I think
it's a hard topic.
It is.
I know the first time we talked about it, I was like, ooh, interesting. What do you do with that?
Right? Well, and like, and I can, you know, I think we had talked about one of the blog articles I wrote recently.
I love that blog.
People don't talk about money, and that's like amongst friends too. Like the idea that, you know, do you know how much your friends make? A lot of people don't, and they feel like they shouldn't talk about it, that it's kind of taboo. But I look at it on the opposite, that like, if you don't talk about it, then it becomes an issue, because you don't know. And so, you know, making sure that, do you know how much your future spouse makes? Do you know what their credit score is? So I find this kind of funny, but when I first started dating my boyfriend, he had, like, we met online, and on his profile, it said, I have a high credit score. Like, something that, you know, people aren't going to necessarily find very sexy. But to me, it's just, that's, you know, what it is. Like, we talk about that, we know those things, and all that. So
that's interesting, if you don't mind. So how did that, so you saw that on his profile, and then did you bring it up on a first date? Did you wait till you guys were exclusive? Like, how did you handle knowing that he talked about that, and you knew that that was a good sign, right? Here he's someone who is open to talking about it. That's a cool story about you guys. And definitely check out Amanda's blog. It's great articles. You can subscribe to it on her website too.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to remember back. We've been together a couple years now, but I think what it kind of, to me, what it showed me is it's somebody who is, you know, careful with their money and aware of things like that, because I get couples who come in and sometimes they don't know what their credit score is.
Interesting.
And
either of them,
yeah, they've just never thought about it. And especially if we're talking about, you know, down the road wanting to buy a house or something, that's something they've got to think about, as I'm sure you know, and the lenders that you deal with. You know, and it can be that people, like I had a couple recently where, you know, it wasn't that she didn't have money, but she had just never built up credit, because she had never had to. She had always used cash, and it wasn't something that they had dealt with. So I think that, you know, it's really those conversations, and I know you're talking about kind of some stories that I've had. I think that a lot of time, one of the big things we see for prenuptial agreements or premarital kind of financial planning is, do they own their own business? You know, I think that people are getting married older, or it's a second or a third marriage, and they have a business. And, you know, as a business owner, and you too, you know, business is important to me, and, you know, they want to make sure that that's protected if something were to happen in the marriage. And so discussing, you know, what will that look like if they, you know, start another business while you're married, because that in California, that's considered community property. So, you know, I think businesses are a big reason that people want to have those discussions. And then I would say, you know, the other big thing that we see is really just, what is your outlook on how you spend or save money? So really having the conversations of understanding, one person might want to save to buy a house, and the other person might want to go on a trip. So
yeah, definitely. Or they're saying, like, it's worth it to rent at the beach because we can have this lifestyle at the beach, and another person feels like it's worth it to buy, but maybe a little bit inland, where the schools are, and it's closer to work and a little maybe more affordable too. So I see that with a lot of clients. It's a big discussion for people.
Yeah, I'm sure it's an interesting always discussion of where they're gonna buy too, and that kind of, even not just the rent and the buy, but where people want to be and what's important to each person. To have those conversations such that when they do go to you, they know where they want to be.
Sure, and I work with clients on that too, because the reality is that life happens and people's plans change.
Mm-hmm.
So in a good way, buying in San Diego, you're buying an asset, you're buying an appreciating asset.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing, whether it's at the beach or whether it's inland, north, south, east, or west. So that's just a good financial decision. And I've had clients, who are single and they buy, and then they start dating someone, and then they decide to move in together and rent out one place and live together in one. So it's all good. They're all good varieties. And for myself, in my 20s single, in my 30s now single, but in my 20s didn't buy a home because I thought, I'm supposed to wait till I'm married to do that, and I so regret it. And I so applaud my friends, married and single, who bought in their 20s, and clients buying in their 20s and 30s anytime, but just getting in the market. I know I get this question a lot, which is, what's happening with the market? And I heard an economist speak this week who said that we're just expecting to see continued appreciation. We averaged 5% for the last 40 years, and we're going to continue to expect to see that. But interest rates probably will go up, and so it will get more expensive to buy down the road. So buying now is a good decision. So it's interesting. I was going to ask you...
I was listening to what you said. I think that, talking about, buying and is it something that you can afford and what is it going to look like down the road is I think professionals that both you and I can work with are actual certified financial planners or financial analysts, and we've got some great ones that we work with because they can help them understand, if you're buying real estate or you're investing in your retirement or in, stocks or whatever, what that's going to look like down the road. Mm-hmm. And so being able to say to them maybe you should buy a home and this is what it's going to do, or buy some investment properties because you can have those, being in San Diego and what that would look like.
Yeah, definitely. So that actually, because rent versus buy or real estate and all these different questions, sometimes people come in, people grow up with ideas about money and what you should spend on and what you shouldn't, and as an adult they form their own opinions. Do you find your job is to help people articulate their already existing philosophies and just get talking about it, or do you find it's to present people with philosophies on how to spend and my ideas about money? How do you go into that as a professional? I'm really curious, just kind of out of my own curiosity.
Yeah, no, certainly. So the conversations that I like to have are just to get an idea of what do they think their personality is, what they say, a spender or a saver, just to kind of start there, and then to talk about from there, what are their financial goals? What is it that they're looking to achieve? And that can be, what are your financial goals this month? Mm-hmm. What are your financial goals this year? 5 years, 10 years? Just to get them thinking and to see, are they on the same page? Okay. Do they, maybe they both know that they want to save up to buy a house, but maybe they also know that it is important to them that they take a trip each year, mm-hmm. that they, put money aside that's not that long-term savings, but that it's something to do, on the short term. And so I think it's really just getting people to start the conversation, because I don't want to be the beginning and the end of that conversation. Right. I want them to know that they're building a strong foundation, and so when they get married, that they're having that conversation. So I think it should be, as often as you need, but sometimes they say with couples, okay, are you going to sit down on a monthly basis? Are you going to sit down on a yearly basis? Something just so that they can know, okay, we're going to build this in and we're going to talk about it, because, expenses only grow. As mm-hmm. kids are expensive. I don't have any kids yet, but I've got a niece and I live with her, and I see, kids are expensive, and they're only going to add to what you have expenses already, mm-hmm. and that's going to change things. So we can't talk about everything at the beginning, but building that foundation.
Nice. Yeah. Since, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to go personal again. Do you guys find in your dating relationship that you and your boyfriend talk about these things as you're moving along?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so we certainly do. So now my boyfriend is studying to be a financial planner, and so I think, and I work with couples that are getting married and getting divorced, so I think we're both more likely to have these conversations. Right. But, that doesn't mean that other people can't. And so, we certainly talk about it. We've been open about things from, the beginning.
That's awesome. And I'm so happy. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot and share things like that. Dina, thank you so much for the question. Ladies, how about a couple buying a home together prior to marriage? How do both parties protect themselves? Great question. So two people together want to buy a house. Great question. Okay, so let's go for it.
Yeah, so I think that that's one of the things we see a lot is that not everyone's getting married these days, and that's okay. It's all right.
So buying a home together, whether or not you're married, right? Even if marriage is not in the future.
Yeah, even if
you're a couple is buying it together.
Yeah, or if you're, people are, dating and buying together before they're married. What I would say in terms of protecting yourselves is having the conversation of what does it look like? Because if you're not married, it's not community property because you don't have that legal framework of saying, okay, anything you acquire while you're married is 50-50. So if you're going to buy something prior to marriage, it's really having a, concrete conversation of how are you going to take title? So how are you going to own that property?
Yeah, so glad you brought it up. That was my speaker last week, right? So we talked about title and the different opportunities for how to take title. So that's going to be number one.
It's important because I don't think people really understand the options sometimes.
Yeah.
But so
it's
how
the legal document that says who owns this, and then based on how it's classified, it decides what happens when one of those people are not involved anymore.
Exactly.
Or wants to get out, or something happens.
Yeah. And then from there, I think in terms of protecting yourselves, it's what are you each putting down? If you're putting in equal, then that's a little bit different. But if one person is putting in more
for the down payment,
understanding how that would come back. Okay. And then from there, it's also how are you paying on a monthly basis? Understanding that, okay, if the title is maybe in one person's name and the loan is in one person's name, but you're paying half of that mortgage, well, if something happens and you guys break up, do you still have an interest? You don't have necessarily an interest in that property. So it can be, we kind of call a cohabitation agreement, something between the two parties saying, okay, we've talked about this and God forbid things don't work out. If we own property together, this is how we want to handle things.
Wow, and a cohabitation agreement is something that can do that for people.
Yes, it certainly can. And I think that it's just really, protecting yourself is understanding what do you want? What do you want if things don't go well? And I think that's the problem is we never want to talk about things not working out, right? We want things to be good and we want things to go the way we want to. And so people don't talk about the worst case scenarios, but it's just remembering that not everything is going to work. And so if you guys buy a couple, if a couple's buying a house together prior to getting married, what is that going to look like?
And they're good questions because you need to answer those questions when you're buying regardless, right? Like you need to know where you're getting your down payment from. You need to know how you're paying for it. So you're having those conversations, or maybe you're making assumptions about those conversations. So having them and then putting it in a document just gets it clear for everyone, right?
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Really smart.
Yeah.
Smart financial planning, not just, it's smart on a whole level.
Yeah. Well, and it's, there's going to be situations too where most of the time I find that people don't have the exact same income, right? People have a difference in what they make, and understanding how does that contribute too, because if you're splitting a mortgage or you're splitting expenses on a property and one person makes 3 times what the other one does, well, you shouldn't be splitting that 50-50, because that's just not fair to both parties,
right?
And so really understanding having that conversation of, okay, well, let's look at the finances and let's look at what I can afford and what you can afford and how do we figure that out.
Nice. So I want to take Dina's question the next step. So let's say a couple buys a home together before they're married. They do an agreement, so they have it spelled out, and then they get married 2 years into owning the home. What happens then for them?
So once you get married, you have depending on how you categorized it and what you put into it, but you have some sort of separate property for each of you that has a community property aspect to it. Because while you're married, unless you have a prenuptial agreement that says differently, all income is considered community property. So I think that what's important then is when you get married, and it doesn't mean you have to have a prenup, but it's again having that conversation and figuring out what are things going to be when you get married. And if you guys didn't, if you did end up getting divorced, would you split that property 50-50, or what does it look like? And that's where you have to kind of understand how do you want that to be, and possibly having a prenuptial agreement to address it.
So interesting. I'm so glad we're talking about this today. It's obviously a really important topic, and I'm appreciating everyone joining us. Chelsea, Allie, thank you so much for joining us. What about people's savings that they come into when they get married? Or not yet married, but they're having the conversations with you. So people have Roth IRAs, people have all sorts of different investments.
Yeah, so I mean, as I've kind of mentioned before, but to kind of lay it out, as California being a community property state, anything prior to getting married is your separate property, and anything while you get married, unless you have a agreement that says differently, is community property. So your retirement accounts, your Roth IRA, 401k, any of that from prior to marriage is separate property. Mm-hmm. But then the question is, if you start contributing to it while you're married, figuring out what's separate versus community. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I think it becomes a conversation too of, you know, is it going to remain community? Is it going to maybe stay separate? Like, what might that look like? And I think that people just don't really kind of think about it, but also understanding, you know, if one person is the only one putting money into their retirement accounts, what is that going to be for the other person if you guys don't work out? So, you know, kind of figuring out how you want to categorize that, and also how much you want to put away. I mean, the goal is to hopefully be married, stay together, and then retire. And so are you guys going to be able to have enough money to do that? And I think that I want them to have that conversation, but then I want to send them to a CFP or someone to have that with, because I know that I can't do for them, investing and stuff.
So that another question, what do you do when you get couples who clearly have very different views of money?
Well, I think the thing to understand is it's okay to have different views as long as you communicate and there's an understanding, right? Mm-hmm. So it needs to be that you each understand the other person's point of view, and you're going to do certain things that they might need. So if one person, you know, is much more frugal about money, they may need to have conversations about what you're spending, and they may need to know, okay, anytime we spend, you know, more than something that's more than $200, I want us to have a conversation about it, or anything that's different. And so I think that it's understanding that it's okay, it's just how you handle it. And I think the other thing is, a lot of times when couples get married, one person is just not interested in handling the finances. And that's okay. I mean, I have a lot of friends who don't want to, and that's fine. I'm not saying it's not, but I think it's important to always know what's going on in your life and in your marriage. And so if you're not the spouse who likes to do the books or likes to know, you know, what's going on financially, just making sure that you make sure you're informed at least. Because I see far too many couples when they're going through divorce, and just one person has no idea what's going on financially while they're married. And that takes a lot to get them up to speed, but also to get them to be able to then move forward.
Do you ever have couples where both are typically the ones in their life, they both are good at it, and they find out, well, what do we do now?
Yeah, I think sometimes that's definitely the case, and that's okay. I mean, I think it should be a team, right? Yeah. You should both be working on it, and you should both be involved in the finances. So, you know, there's definitely that, but I think far too often we don't see that, and it's not just a gender thing. I see it both ways. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. So interesting. What else is on your mind today? What else do you think people need to know about this topic, and what else have you seen from your clients?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is, I think that people were never really thinking about it before, that the only time that people talked about a prenup was, oh, you know what, like, he or she has a lot of money and the other person has nothing, and their parents are saying, and the parents or family is saying, you've got to get a prenup. Okay. And so it was looked at it was looked at as being very unromantic, right? Not what you want to talk about when you're planning a wedding. Sure. And also it's kind of like, well, God, you don't trust me? Like, you think that I'm going to take your money or whatever it is. And
that's how it was looked at in the past.
Yeah.
And even nowadays, you think?
I think that it's changing, but I still think that there's some of that mentality. Okay. Because on top of the, you know, what it's looked like or how it's looked at, I think it's also the idea of, God, I don't want to talk about getting divorced when I'm getting married. Sure. People don't want to do that. But like I look at it as like, okay, you don't buy insurance, you know, for your home because you plan on it burning down, right? You buy insurance for your home so you hope that it never happens. Right. But God forbid it does, you've planned and you know what's going to happen. Right. So the same thing with a prenup is saying that, God, I say to my couples all the time, I hope you never have to see me again. I hope you know, we do this, you sign it, and you put it away, and you never look at it again. Awesome. But you're planning that so that if something, God forbid, does happen, you know what you're going to do, and you know how you want to handle that. And, you know, especially you want to handle that in a way that, you know, doesn't turn into this huge mess.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
think that's important for people to realize kind of what's changing with that.
It's good to hear that that's changing. That's
Yeah.
great to hear. I think a lot of things are changing for the good. I've learned so much from you today. How can people find out, how can they connect with you when they have more questions?
Yeah, so you can check us out online. Our website is sandiegofamilymediation.com.
Okay.
And you can always email me. My email is amanda@sandiegofamilymediation.com. Or you can also call us. We're at 858-736-2411, and we're always happy to answer any questions that people might have, offer a free consult, and just want to be a resource. If we're not the right resource as well, I always like to get people to who that would be.
Awesome, fantastic, great. As I mentioned, Amanda's got a fantastic blog. She's a popular writer and radio star, and make sure that you follow and check out. They're tagged as well on the Facebook post here. Please also like and follow Ilana Herring Realtor so you can get notified of next week's episode. Do this every Friday. Let me know when you have a specific topic you're interested in hearing. We've got one coming up in a few weeks from now that was a specially requested topic, so really excited for that. And I know I learned a tremendous amount from you, Amanda, today, so thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.